Before I get started, I have to say, as a survivor, if you remember no other new rule, remember to believe women. Intersectionality. It's a word we often hear but rarely understand. We, of course, shouldn't take even its incorrect usage for granted. Before 2017, there is little presence of this word in major press or media content. In 2014, the word started making its way around millennial activist circles, social justice spaces, and the amorphous virtual Wakanda known as Black Twitter. But now it seems to be a word on everyone's lips, from the Hollywood actresses of Time's Up to mainstream media outlets. In fact, the term intersectionality has been included in 16 pieces in the New York Times this year alone. I know because I counted. But this concept is not new. Black leaders and thinkers throughout the 20th century provided the foundation upon which starlets now give Emmy speeches. It was W.E.B. Du Bois's timeless revelation of double consciousness in 1903. One ever feels his or hers two-ness, he said. An American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. It was Audre Lorde, the gifted queer poet and scholar, who insisted that there is no thing as a single issue struggle because we do not lead single issue lives. And finally, it was Kimberly Crenshaw, a leading scholar of critical race theory and a bi-coastal law professor, who coined the term intersectionality in 1989. Intersectionality. We use it and we don't even know what it means. But some of us have lived intersectionality all our lives. I am a woman of color. For me, intersectionality is not a fad or a theory, it is my life. Intersectionality is real to me, and I don't get to just put it down when the mood suits me or dismiss it when it confronts my privilege. Because, as Professor Crenshaw explains, the intersectional experience is greater than the sum of racism and sexism. If you remember nothing else I say here today, remember that intersectionality is not merely the double burden of racism or sexism, of being a woman and being a person of color. Instead, it's a lens to explore and explain the unique ways in which people who belong to two or more oppressed social groups are subjugated systematically, institutionally, and interpersonally. It is not merely that some days I experience racism and other days I experience sexism. Rather, it is that oppression shows up differently for me than it does for Black men or for white women. Intersectional oppression is just different. It's not just more, it's different. Intersectional oppression is the stereotype that Asian women must be docile at work, at home, and at play. It's the archetype that Latinas must be spicy and that the oppression that renders indigenous women invisible. It is the angry Black woman trope, lobbed at everyone from Serena Williams to Michelle Obama for exhibiting audacity. Part of embracing an intersectional framework to empower and support women of color means resisting the urge you may be feeling right now in the pit of your stomach and at the back of your throat to say, but all women. Fight it. Fight that urge. Because in a moment of sporting passion, all women are not characterized as a brute. Black women are. In a moment of confusion, all women are not stripped of their Japanese and Haitian heritage to be drawn as a white, blonde-haired woman because, of course, all virtuous women are white, but women of color are. Anytime you feel the urge to utter, but all women, stop yourself and ask, is it all women, or is that your privilege talking? All women don't make an average of 78 cents to the white man's dollar. White women do. Already, white high school dropouts have more wealth than Black and Latinx college graduates. So when you compound the women's pay gap with the racial one, women of color are hardly making a fair day's pay. Most of the charts that break down women's pay gaps by race don't even include indigenous women. But this is what Black women make. And this is what Native women make. And this is what Latinas make. And standing at the unique intersection of the model minority myth that Asian American and Pacific Islander women do, they are erased from even our most supposedly equitable contexts, as we fail to disaggregate the data that often separates the experience of Chinese and Japanese women from Cambodian and Burmese ones. Our failures to struggle for and support women of color in leadership even manifest in credit. Here we are all along, and we've been appropriating a term coined by a Black woman because the intersection at which Kimberly Crenshaw stands renders a Black woman's thought the homespun wisdom of a wise mammy and not the well-earned scholarship of an intellect. Our failing to support women of color in our full power is not just a moral one. It's a failing of efficacy. Moments that leave women of color behind are insufficient. Movements that leave women of color behind are insufficient. Teams that promote women of color less are often less successful. Boards that tokenize women of color instead of empowering them are lacking critical perspective. The bottom line needs women of color just as much as our justice work does. But beyond your bottom line is the hidden cost. The one that rarely gets discussed at outside of kitchen tables and happy hours, outside of beauty salons or therapy sessions. It's a cost that you may not know exists because you've never had to pay it. Imagine how it feels to raise money from donors that insist on meeting in members-only clubs where all servers look like you and none of the members do. Ask yourself how much extra time you'll spend crafting an email to a direct report who says your management style is intimidating. And they'd rather the director that came before you who used to yell at employees and throw objects against the wall. The unique oppression women of color face in the workplace manifests in more than just lost wages. We can measure our unique oppression in lost time, in lost energy and energy wasted, in an emotional and cognitive tax that makes our work streams more burdensome. You and I can do the same job and perform the exact same work streams, but women of color will have to pay an additional tax. Don't feel sorry for us. We are strong and worthy and powerful. We thrive in spite of these things. We just shouldn't have to. The only way to level the playing field is to change the game. So what are the new rules? Power, not pity. I don't need your guilt. Feeling guilty about the privilege you have but didn't earn is a wasted emotion. It doesn't get us anywhere and it doesn't make us any better. Instead, spend your privilege. Recognize that you had the ability to open doors and make ways and make room at tables that otherwise wouldn't include many women of color. And when you spend that privilege, don't demand that the people you spent it on subjugate themselves to you eternally in the name of gratitude. Rather, support them in paying it forward. Tell them to make more room and make more ways for more women. It's not about helping women of color handle the hardships, it's about dismantling the hardships themselves. Don't just hire Black women, listen to them. Don't just promote Indigenous women, resource their work. Don't just relegate the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion to the people of color on your team because such demands only add to that additional tax that they're already paying every single day. Diversity, equity, and inclusion should be everyone's job. It should be measured in performance reviews, and your manager should receive feedback on it. The cultural responsiveness of your leaders should factor into promotions and raises, and diversity training should be more than just one day, but it should be an ongoing commitment to evolution. So what are the new rules? Power, not possession. We treat power like it's a scarcity instead of recognizing that it exists in abundance. Power is not some finite resource that's going to run out in a few years. Power won't disappear just because someone else shares it, any more than the air will disappear just because someone else breathes it. If you are feeling threatened when someone else, especially a woman of color, starts to gain some power or some influence or some space that she has earned, deep down, You're simply afraid that if someone has more power, it means you'll have less. Instead, realize that sharing power instead of hoarding power actually gets us further faster. And it helps ensure that when we get there, we all get there together. After all, it's not justice or equity if we all don't have it. So what are the new rules? Power, not paternalism. Putting women of color into already established systems that were not built for us in the first place will not produce different results. It will just give your websites a bit more color. Don't just teach the rules, change the game. Support women of color to change the institutions, structures, and systems that we are all a part of from the outside and the inside. In our leadership, we leave things better than we found them. And we do that because we want to make institutions stronger for everyone. But when we lead, don't set our agenda for us. That's not partnership, that's paternalism. That's not power, that's you assuming that you know better than us, even when we've got the same degrees, the same experience, and we've also had to build the muscle from hurdling over intersectional oppression all our lives. When women of color win, we all win. We are the tide that rises and lifts all boats. So what's the new rule? Power. Women of color already have it inside of us. It's high time folks start recognizing it. Thank you so much.